Good morning, and thank you for joining us for our midweek devotion from Unity Baptist Church in Champaign, Illinois. We are located at 404 South Duncan Road in Champaign, just south of Prairie Gardens on Duncan Road, and we'd love to have you come and join us. Our services on Sunday morning begin at 10:15, and we have a wonderful church, wonderful group of people, and we would love for you to come and join us as we worship the Lord together. This past couple of weeks, my grandson and I took a trip to Athens, Greece, and also to Israel to do kind of a tour of Bible lands and different things that took place. It was very interesting, thoroughly enjoyed it, and gives us a totally different perspective of the Holy Land and where things took place. And one of the stops that we made was in Athens, Greece, and to the Acropolis, the Parthenon, to Mars Hill, or also known as, I learned that I have mispronounced it all these years, and it's known as the Areopagus, and so we went there. Most of us who are Americans know it as Mars Hill, and the sermon that the Apostle Paul preached on Mars Hill, which my grandson read that message while we were up there on that piece of property, and I want to look at it. It's in Acts chapter 17. The Apostle Paul's on his second missionary journey. He has heard the Macedonian call, and so he went to the city of Philippi, and that's where Lydia was saved, the seller of purple from Thyatira. She was converted. The Philippian jailer was converted, and a church was established there. One of the, I would say, one of Paul's favorite churches. And from that church and the letter that was sent to that congregation, we have the book of Philippians. But there was problems in Philippi with the Apostle Paul. And so he had to flee that city. And we find out in Acts chapter 17 that he and his companions went to Amphipolis and Apollonia, and they finally ended up in Thessalonica, which was a major port city in Asia Minor, still is, by the way. It's known today as Salonika, but back then it was Thessalonica. And so he ministered there for 3 weeks. And when he was done, a church had been established, a very thriving church was established in the city of Thessalonica. But the Jews were stirred up about what Paul was teaching, and so they chased him out of town, and he went to Berea and began to establish a ministry in Berea. And when the Jews of Thessalonica found out what was going on in Berea, they came to Berea and stirred up the people there. And so Paul was kind of escorted out of town by some of the brethren there. And he ended up in the city of Athens. And he had left Timothy and Silas to go back to Thessalonica and get the saints there in that congregation. And it couldn't have been a very big congregation by that time, but he wanted to send them back and get that congregation established in the doctrines of the Christian faith. And so they were gone. Paul went to the city of Athens, and he was waiting for them there. But Paul was not a person to be idle for very long. And so we find out, beginning in verse number 16, says, "Now while Paul waited for them at Athens, his spirit was stirred in him when he saw the city wholly given to idolatry. Therefore disputed he in the synagogue with the Jews and with the devout persons, and in the market daily with them that met with him. Then certain philosophers of the Epicureans and of the Stoics encountered him, And some said, what will this babbler say? Other some, he seemeth to be a setter forth of strange gods, because he preached unto them Jesus and the resurrection. And they took him and brought him unto Areopagus, saying, May we know what this new doctrine whereof thou speakest is? For thou bringest certain strange things to our ears. We would know therefore what these things mean. For all the Athenians and strangers which were there spent their time in nothing else but either to tell or to hear some new thing. So I'd just like to talk to you about a couple of things this morning as I consider the Apostle Paul at Athens. The first thing I want you to notice that as Paul watched this, as he stood in this city and he kind of toured the city. I mean, Athens, even at that time, was a very famous city, probably not the largest city in Greece at that time. Right now, from what our guide told us, it's somewhere between 4.5 and 5 million people. It wasn't even near that. In fact, she told us that in Paul's day, the city was probably, and by the way, the city of that time was kind of built around the Areopagus, and so it was about 20,000 people. So it wasn't a huge metropolitan area like it is today. But what Paul noticed was that this was a city and the people in that city that was wholly given to idols. Paul is a preacher of the gospel. He's waiting for his companions, but he's not idle. His heart is to spread the gospel. His heart is to share the good news of the gospel with those who were around him, whoever they happened to be. And what I want you to notice here in verse number 16 is that his spirit was stirred in him when he saw the city wholly given to idols. If you look in the ESV, this is what it says. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was deeply distressed when he saw the city given over to idols. And the thing that I want to point out to us is that Paul was distressed by the spiritual condition of the people that he observed in the city of Athens. Right now, we would consider this a rather small city, and maybe it was even in that day not considered that great of an area. But it was a powerful and an influential city, even in that day. Philosophically and religiously, it was a very important city. And the Apostle Paul observed this bearer of the good news of the gospel. And he was troubled. He was distressed. It says that his spirit was stirred in him. It was provoked within him. Provoked to do what? Provoked to share the gospel. And I wonder on this day, as we consider for just a few minutes a devotion that hopefully will challenge all of us. I ask you the question, what is it that stirs you? You know, Jesus in his ministry would, in various places, it says that he observed the multitudes and he was moved with compassion on them, because they were as sheep having no shepherd. They were just wandering around. And that must have been the same sensation, the same emotion, the same stirring of spirit that happened with the Apostle Paul as he stood and he watched the people of the city of Athens and they have all of these gods everywhere. And his spirit was stirred in him to proclaim to them the truth of the gospel. What is it that stirs us when we go to university? What is it that stirs up when we go to that office, to that factory, to that job site, or that school classroom? Or we live in that neighborhood, or we talk to our neighbors and we observe what goes on around it. Is there any stirring? Is there any moving of compassion? Those of us who bear the good news of the gospel, are we moved at all by what we see in the world around us? Is there anything that we observe that stirs us to share the gospel? You know, we complain. I know I do. I look around the world and I just think, man, what a mess. And we complain about it. We talk about it, usually among ourselves. We don't understand why people would live the way they live, but we give them no alternative. Paul looked at these people and he was moved. These are eternity-bound people, and Paul was moved. His spirit was stirred in him. Not to just sit there and twiddle his thumbs, not just to sit there and just, boy, these people. His spirit was stirred in him to do something. And not to just do anything, we find in verse number 17, but to do something that is going to offer the people an alternative. Are we ever stirred to do that? Or do we just get disgusted? Do we just write them off and let them go? Paul was not like that. And we're going to find out in the next couple of weeks that Paul did something. He did something constructive. He did something to provide those people an alternative. And the alternative that he offered to them was the gospel. You say, well, the people that I know would never listen to that. How do you know? Paul didn't know this. He didn't know that there were going to be anybody who would receive the message that he was proclaiming. And we're going to talk about that as well in the next couple of weeks. But that's irrelevant. He was moved. And he was moved to do something. And in doing something, he shared with them the gospel. And we will see the results of that. I pray today as we go out into the world and we observe the people of the world, instead of condemning them and saying, you know, what are these people thinking? That our hearts would be stirred, our spirit would be moved to share with them the gospel and give to them an alternative to the life that they live now, and give them a hope that is eternal and that is found in Jesus Christ. May you take up that challenge today and share the good news of the gospel. Father, I pray that you will bless this lesson, bless this time, help us to think about what we are doing as we stand around, as Paul was standing around, just waiting. But in his waiting, his spirit was stirred. May ours be as well. And may we today commit ourselves to share the gospel with those around us. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Join us again next week as we move through this very brief visit of the Apostle Paul to the city of Athens. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.